Deconverted man here?
It's Deconverted man.
Deconverted.
Deconverted man here. I'm going to tell you a true story. I was once known as Infinite Hope on YouTube, and I was known as Infinite Hope for longer than a year, and I did quite a number of videos. And I wanted to look at some of those videos I did and analyze my past self. So this is going to be weird, but here goes. Debate time, how to convert an atheist video. This video was used with permission. I'm going to be using clips from the How to Convert Atheist video originally uploaded by YouTuber FightingAtheist and break them into chunks and then respond to each in turn. Here we go.
Ask any believer what would convince him he was mistaken and persuade him to leave his religion and become an atheist. And if you get a response, it will almost always be, "Nothing. I have faith in my God."
Why is this such a bad thing? I think it's a very good thing to have a strong conviction in what you believe in, and I don't think there needs to be any doubt if you have a pure faith of this nature. I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. Oh boy, it's painful to hear myself say that. I no longer consider faith a virtue, rather I want people to challenge what they hold most dear. And I wonder if FightingAtheist is still around. Be interested to see if he wanted to comment on my videos now. But at any rate, yeah, it's true. Many believers would say nothing would convince them, and that is a bad thing. I would have added some things to that. I would have said that, okay, if you're trying to make me change my position, right, and you're unwilling to change yours, then how can you want me to change mine? Isn't that a little bit hypocritical? That is to say, you want me to change, but you're not willing to change yourself. So you think you're absolutely right, and I'm not so sure that you are. And I'm willing to change, but you're not, and see, that's not even. I want it to be an even playing field here. So I think it is bad to have a very strong conviction. I'd rather have facts than faith.
Many theists, by their own admission, structure their beliefs so that no evidence could possibly disprove them.
This may very well be true. There may be theologies and theists that structure their theology in such a way that no argument can be given against them. But faith doesn't require evidence at all. Faith doesn't need evidence, nor does it want evidence in a way. Now, that's not saying there isn't evidence available. That's just saying that evidence isn't something that somebody of a pure faith would need to go after. Well, I guess I didn't really have a pure faith after all. Is that the no pure faith fallacy? Did I just make a new fallacy up? But no, the facts are what matters, not your faith, not your strong conviction. The facts, the data. And it's very telling. At least I was honest back then. I was going to the real faith. I was appealing to what faith really was. I wasn't trying to make faith into something that it wasn't. I was telling you like it is. Even back then, I was being very honest, saying faith is just faith. There may or may not be evidence, and in a way, it might not even want evidence. Interesting. Why? Because once you have evidence, you don't have faith anymore. So, seeing that as a virtue, I no longer hold to that, but obviously I once did, and again, it's just painful to hear that I held that. Jesus remarks on a child's faith and says that we need to have faith as a child, that unquestioning belief that a child has. This is a pure faith in God's eyes. It's, again, with the disciple Thomas, who was a doubter. He said, because you have seen, you will not be as blessed as those who have not seen. Blessed are those that that believe without seeing. In the Old Testament, it was very clear that there were many followers of faith that didn't have any evidence. They just believe in God without anything to back it up. It was a very pure faith.
Well, once we did the research past self, we learned that all of those stories were pretty much made up after the facts, and that the Doubting Thomas character is a completely fictional character put in just to justify faith as a position over demanding evidence. Doubting Thomas should have been the hero of the story, but he was turned into the villain. Why? Because faith is stressed in that religion over fact. Now, some of the Old Testament people, if they did exist, which they didn't, would have had direct evidence of God. And then they would have had passed down stories of that. But those who did have that direct evidence didn't question that evidence for a moment, not even a second. And here's the other thing. What's interesting is that you have a story that is clearly fabricated where one person goes up on top of a mountain, comes down, and tells everyone that he talked to God. And everyone's like, oh yeah, sure, let's believe that. Really? Really? They were just going to go along with that? Okay. And, of course, then you have some events happen where they see the Red Sea part and things like this. And that's pretty awesome. But, again, nobody was like, how is this happening? So you're assuming that the Bible is true just from pure faith. And to go back to the sayings of Jesus, faith like a child. But then the Bible also says, when I became an adult, I put away childish things. So which is it? Can't be both.
This sort of faith is a good faith to have according to the scriptures, and it doesn't require any evidence at all.
In short, they are closed-minded, and have been taught to be closed-minded.
Here he's referring to the extreme Christians, just as I have referred to the extreme atheists. Extreme groups of any flavor, variety, whether it be religion, politics, or theology, non-theology, anybody that's extreme is dangerous.
Hey, I still agree with that idea. Good one there, Infinite Hope. But, no, he's referring to all religion, not just the more fundamentalistic aspects of it. Anybody that doesn't want to let go of their idea is stubborn, is deliberately just they are closed-minded. There's no better word for it. They're unwilling to question what they hold most dear. Why? Because it's a virtue. They think it's a virtue, but why not question about it? Say, well, wait a minute. What if it's not a virtue? What if it isn't good to just believe something? What if it's bad? What if none of these writings are real? Let's start questioning that, not just believe it because it's written down. Of course, that's what I eventually did that made me deconvert, but at this point in my life, I was far, far away from that.
Although there are extremists out there, they are in the minority. They might be more vocal than the non-minority, but to just assume that everybody's this way is to assume something that is incorrect and flawed.
In light of this, it's ironic that atheists are often accused of being the closed-minded ones.
I don't think you are closed-minded per se, but I think you have closed yourself off to an area of reality that I experience daily. I experience it and I feel it daily, and others do the same. It's apart from religion and apart from theology. It is the area that I have separated into spirituality. It's an area that we as humans need to recognize to handle our existence.
And you're wrong. Plenty of people don't recognize it, and they handle existence just fine. In fact, maybe even better than I did as a Christian. Certainly, I think that I'm far more realistic about my own existence than I was when I believed what I believed back then. But there are a number of humans who have never experienced this. They're doing just fine. And there's people who literally can't experience this experience. And to assume that it's spiritual is to make a huge assumption.
It's an area that I feel that if you don't recognize, you're not being closed-minded, you're just closing yourself off.
To be fair, I invite all theists to respond by preparing a list of things that they would accept as proof that atheism is true.
I'll actually gladly do this at the end of the video, but it almost seems like preparing this list will somehow prove that theists are on the same level as atheists, and I just feel this air of arrogance on this. It's like, because you're not doing this, you're not as good as I am, sort of feeling, and maybe I'm just taking this the wrong way, but that's how I feel about this video so far.
And there's my cognitive dissonance firing on all full cylinders there. Full cylinders. I don't know how many cylinders there are to cognitive dissonance. But nonetheless, there I am saying, I feel like you're being arrogant. I feel like you're making yourself bigger than I am. No, he didn't even suggest that. Nowhere did he even hint at that. But you feel that way because you are having to question things that you never had to question before.
The first category deals with things that would absolutely convince me of the truth of a particular religion. If shown any of these, I would convert on the spot.
Let me just address one thing before I go and try to prove any of the things that he lists. Nobody can convert anybody. It is God's job to convert us, not humans. If I can show or even infer any of these things, I don't think that will convert them. Only God can do that, not me.
That whole bit is just my Christian training kicking in there. It's not me that will convince you, it's God that's ultimately going to convince you. That really hurls the burden off of the presenter to the imaginary figure that they think is going to convince this person. So that ultimately, if I fail, it's not my fault. It's that you didn't hear God calling to you. So it really wasn't up to me in the end. Which really means that no one should ever try to convert anyone at all, because if God's doing it anyways, then what's the point of humans doing it again? Why have lesser beings do the work that God could do itself? It really just doesn't make sense. Now, that doesn't make it false, but certainly makes it questionable, and it's something that I didn't question because I was stuck in my Christian mantras.
Verified, specific prophecies that could not have been contrived.
Actually, Jesus fulfilled many prophecies, and none of them could have been contrived, although he will deal with this later in his video.
Jesus didn't probably exist and didn't fulfill any of those prophecies, and many of the prophecies aren't actual prophecies. Those things were written later to fit the earlier stories, and in some cases, the earlier stories were changed to fit the later stories. So, no. Now, this guy is asking for confirmed prophecies that can't be contrived as evidence of a deity. That's not what I would ask for, but that's what he was asking for. My requirements are, well, you know my requirements by now: empirical evidence, repeatable tests, logically coherent argument. And prophecies wouldn't fall into any of those categories because it doesn't tell me anything other than you're really good at predicting stuff.
If the Bible, for example, said, on the first day of the first month in the year 2010, the pillars of the earth will shake, and a western part of the new world will be lost to the sea, and then, on January 1st, 2010, a tremendous earthquake sends California to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, I would become a believer. If the prophecy is vague, unclear, or garbled, like Nostradamus' ramblings, for example, it must be detailed, specific, and unambiguous in its prediction and wording.
I put these two together because it seems that prophecy was pretty vague to me. And Revelation has an awful lot of prophecies that many Christians debate about whether they've happened or have yet to happen. The book of Revelation is probably the only book of prophecy in the Bible where most Christians will agree that it hasn't happened yet. Although, as I said, there are a few that have stated that there are events mentioned in Revelation that have already taken place. These events, however, must be dug deeply into to be understood to have already taken place. Some Christians have debated that Revelation has already occurred, and its place in time was actually in the Bible times and not ours. The debate about Revelation is probably the greatest debate that you'll find in Christianity. If it's going to happen eventually, and none of these events have yet to occur, there is no specific dates given on when they will happen, just that they will happen eventually.
Ding, nabbit, past self, you went off on a red herring. He was asking for specific, non-vague prophecies. Revelations is about Nero. You didn't know that at the time, I know. Way back then, I was just utterly obsessed with Revelation, the book of Revelation. I had read it, I don't know, more than 12 times. I don't know how many times I read it. I almost had it memorized at some point. I was going to memorize it at any rate. I really, really liked it. I really was into it. I really wanted to know what it meant. I really wanted to understand it. I really wanted to get this. I would have these little sayings like, give me a flaming sword and send me into battle. I was just really excited that I would see something miraculous happen. And that is the sort of excitement or fear that the end times people prey upon when they say the end is right around the corner, and they have all these different things that supposedly prove that. But Revelation is nothing more than a coded letter about King Nero. Why in the bleep they decided to canonize it is beyond me, but nonetheless, it is debated. I don't know if it's the number one debate in Christianity, but it is certainly debated, even still, which should have pointed out to me that there's something wrong in the system, that it can't figure out which interpretation is the correct one. Because there isn't a system in Christianity to do that. Everyone thinks that they're right, and everyone points to their own Bible verses and their own interpretation of those verses to make them mean whatever they want. And that includes the book of Revelation. This guy, Fighting Atheist, wants an unvague, specific prophecy. And we just don't find anything like that in the Bible. Or any other holy book, for that matter.
For example, Christian apologists claim that Jesus fulfilled many Old Testament prophecies, but the authors of the New Testament obviously had access to those prophecies.
This is true, but I have to ask the question, why would anyone make up such a story? The disciples all got horribly killed for their beliefs and for their spreading of the gospel, what they considered the good news. Why would they stick to such a conviction even unto death? If they made this up, they would have certainly given this up as a false story. At least one of them would have upon pain of death. There's no way they would have all stuck to the same story.
And you're not thinking critically past self. The disciples themselves also could have been made up. And their deaths also could have been made up. So they're sticking to their story because they're made up fictional characters. And the writer can make them do whatever the writer wants them to do. Plenty of people have died for beliefs that aren't true. Plenty of people have died believing that something was true that wasn't. Heaven Gates cult, for example. Mormons were very persecuted. Why would Joseph Smith make up such a story? Money, fame, power, women, all of the above, any of the above. You're tired of the system the way it is, so you invent a religion catches on, you can make some good money out of that. There's any number of reasons that people would make up such a story. And since the dates that we have for the earliest copies of the Bible are way later after the supposed events, it's not too ludicrous to suggest that somebody somewhere heard about these cults and decided to elaborate further and write it all down and maybe turn a good profit on doing so. It's very easy to make up characters and have them do whatever you want. Unfortunately, I wasn't too much of a critical thinker at the time. I was a mindless sheep. I grew out of it, but anyways, back to this.
Just think, what if Jesus had said something like this? My disciples, I say unto thee that energy is mass times the speed of light multiplied unto itself. Of course, the people of the time would have been baffled.
Not only would they have been confused, I think that they would have recognized that Jesus was no longer following the thing that he was trying to teach. Spirituality has nothing to do with science. It is apart from it, separate from it, above it, beyond it, surpasses it. It cannot be withheld within the constraints that science has. His believers probably would have doubted his words at this point. If it had made it to Scripture, I'm pretty sure that skeptics would find reasons to discount it just as they find reasons to discount other things found in Scriptures.
Hey, look, more cognitive dissonance at work here. No, Jesus, if he existed, didn't have to just preach about spirituality. He could have talked about scientific stuff. He could have told people about how things work. And he could have said, look, write all this stuff down because people aren't going to believe that I existed unless we write it down. But that didn't happen. Rather, the story is constructed so that evidence is irrelevant and that faith is what matters. Don't see, just believe. Don't question, just follow.
And now for my own personal list. This list will convince me that Christianity is wrong. I don't think it will convince me other religions will be wrong, but certainly will convince me that all Christian religions are wrong. I'm going to give you 3 very difficult things to do, but if you accomplish any of them and nothing happens, then I'll seriously have my doubts about my faith. Number 1, form a one-world government system. Number 2, form a one-world religion. Number 3, rebuild the temple in Jerusalem.
Alright, so I'm basically asking for the impossible here. The temple in Jerusalem, if it was rebuilt, would probably cause World War III or something near close to it. As far as forming one world government, it's not going to happen. Just not. One world religion, not going to happen. It's not. Just no way. So, yeah, I'm asking for the impossible. Now, going back to the temple being rebuilt, let's just say somebody did that. Let's just say, they stormed the temple, they rebuilt it. Well, there is such a thing as self-fulfilled prophecy. That is to say, hey, we built the temple. Oh, look, everyone's going to war over this. Must be the end of the world. Like the Bible said, we were right all along. Armageddon time. But it's not Armageddon of a divine nature, it's Armageddon of a human nature. But everybody would be so busy killing each other that nobody would stop and think, hey, wait, maybe this has nothing to do with other than a piece of land, a piece of dirt that people are debating over because they think it's holy.
Yes, all 3 of these things are pretty difficult to do, but all 3 are mentioned in the book of Revelation as occurring when the world is meant to end. If you were able to succeed at even one of these and nothing happened, nothing, the last one I think there would be some war over it, but nothing spiritual or nothing outlandish started happening that's also mentioned in the book of Revelation, I would start to have my doubts.
Well, I think that my current list of 3 things is much more reasonable than my old list of 3 things. So it would convince me of any idea these days as empirical evidence, repeatable tests, or a logically coherent argument. Any of those 3 or all 3 would convince me that something is true, or at the very least plausible, or something that I should investigate further, if nothing else. what I'm asking for here is basically what William Lane Craig asked for later. He said that what would convince him that Christianity is wrong is to find the body of Jesus. Well, if the guy never existed, you would never find it. And even if you did find skeleton remains, how could you identify it as Jesus? So asking for something that is completely impossible is not reasonable as a thing that would convince you that you were wrong. But I didn't know that at the time. I do now, but I didn't back then.
I figure that somebody's got to start this movement at some point in time. I mean, these things aren't just going to do it on their own, right? So who better to do it than the anti-theists? They will, in one stroke, disprove Christianity once and for all if they're able to do any of these things. Now, should something start to happen that's also mentioned in the book of Revelation, then Christians will have something to say, hey, look, we were right the whole time. And that's my list. Well, I certainly hope you're able to accomplish one of those three things. I mean, you want to disprove Christianity. It's the best way to go about it, in my opinion.
I think that I said anti-theist rather than atheist or skeptic or whatever because of cognitive dissonance. I was really trying to make this guy out to be a villain. I was feeling really attacked, more than likely. So anti-theist is not the correct term to use. This guy is not an anti-theist, not at all. I've heard some anti-theists, and this guy, no, he's nowhere even close to being an anti-theist. No way. As far as starting any of these movements, no, we don't care about doing that sort of stuff. And then again, I can't really speak for all atheists, skeptics, agnostics, and anti-theists, so maybe some people do want to form a one-world government or a one-world religion. Actually, I think Catholicism would be very happy if it could get everybody under its wing. But as far as the one-world government, I don't know. I think there's more problems with that than there are potential benefits. But I just don't see it happening.
Honestly, though, look, we debate these things because they're important to us. When I debate things, it's because certain things just don't make sense. And I've debated this video because certain things in it didn't make sense. But believing in God isn't something that somebody can convince you of. It's a personal journey that you have to take. If you take that journey and arrive at a non-belief, then that's your conclusion. But the journey shouldn't stop. You should continue the journey in seeking God. That's a journey that's going to last your entire lifetime. Until next time, peace out.
I do think that the journey is important, but I don't think that it should occupy your entire life. Looking for God, in and of itself, is a journey. And looking for evidence is a much better approach. If there's a deity to be found, then it will be found through data and evidence, because it would have to interact with this world in a way that would leave fingerprints somehow. And if not, then it's identical with nature, and if it's identical with nature, then we might as well not posit it at all, and we should just be skeptical about it. My concluding statement in Infinite Hope videos was usually peace out. My concluding statement in my videos these days is, unless and until we have a logically coherent argument, we must continue to be skeptical of the conclusions. Infinite Hope, you were wrong. As long as you have faith and I have facts, you will always be wrong. And I will always be